Good afternoon. Welcome to 12th session of Life After Lockdown. And we have very eminent expert panel in place. While we are cognizant of the participants also, there are who are CEOs and very senior professionals from the industry and healthcare profession. Welcome all to 12th session of Life After Lockdown. Very briefly, let me tell you about the panelists. Many of his known figures. You might be knowing them at personal level. We have Sunil, Unny, Guptan. Professor Sunil is the faculty for 16 years in Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He's a visiting faculty and teach communication there. He's also teaching at Indian Institute of Management, Udaipur for last 9 years. He has been in ASCII and many institutions as a teaching, visiting faculty. He runs his own company, Touching Lives. I know him at personal level for last 2 decades. And when we started in 2010, the CPD, Continuing Professional Program for Medical Professional, for the doctors, he was among the 5-6 faculties who were from across the globe, including UK, US. So welcome, Dr. Sunil, to Life After Lockdown. We have medical doctor representing the entire healthcare community for this session at least, Dr. Balaji Jaganamohan. Dr. Balaji Jaganamohan is a diabetologist, consultant diabetologist at Apollo and Sagar Hospital. He has been very active in all the different technology as well as healthcare education. He is a tutor in Medversity Fellowship in Diabetes Program. Medversity is a unit, education unit of Apollo. He is executive committee member in Apollo Sugar. He's also a visiting faculty at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He has been faculty in RSSDI, Diabetes India. He's a founder trustee, Reed Foundation, and awarded Best Clinician and Clinical Service across Pan-India by Apollo Group. His center is one of the best diabetic center in Apollo Group. He has publication at multiple journals. I often see his publication in ADA, American Diabetic Association Scientific Program. I have been a pleasure to associate with him for last 6 years in a very engaging program called Clinics, which we have been doing more than 50 cities across the country for physicians. And he has been there not only faculty moderator in all the program at Bangalore Center, but he's also among a very few senior consultant who is the part of national board of this program. So welcome, Dr. Balaji Jaganamohan, to this program, Life After Lockdown. We have Sourabh Agrawal from industry. Sourabh is a vice president and head sales and marketing in Lupin for India and Sri Lanka. Sourabh has a very long, more than 18 years of experience in marketing. Unichem, then Zydus, Ranbaxy, Sun Pharma, and I have the pleasure of working with him in Dr. Reddy's. He was there for 3 years in Dr. Reddy's and now Lupin. So welcome, Sourabh, to this program, Life After Lockdown. Good to see that many of the professionals, senior professionals from healthcare as well as pharmaceutical life science joined this program, the 12th program of this series, Life After Lockdown. And we are going to start the session with the one questions from the audience. Let me start with the audience, which mostly we do to understand what is happening at the level of across the industry, across the professionals. Covid-19, when it came India on 30th January this year, from there till now, we have reached 150 days. And the thought process, I think Corona and COVID-19 is one word, is most commonly discussed, debated, talked in all the forum, and even the non-medical professionals also, they are deeply get affected through COVID. While all of us are affected with COVID, let me ask what's the opinion about the audience. I'm publishing a poll here. You have to respond the poll in last 150 days. What was the most dominant concern or thought in your mind? There are options given here. If you have any option answer other than this option, you can also put in the chat box. I see a participant responding there. The audience may not be able to see the response right now. We'll publish and then we'll share that response. In last 150 days, what was the most dominant concern or thought in your mind? Okay, so we'll wait for another 10 seconds. The people who join new, you can find these poll questions below the videos. By the time people are responding, a quick information here: whenever your internet gets slow, you can reconnect. You can see in your system there is a reconnect item. You can reconnect always, and the system will cure its problem itself. Right? I think we got very diverse response here. Let me end the poll and publish the poll. Oh, 52% people responded that COVID-19 safety concern for self and family was the most dominant concern in their mind. 14% were concerned about the business and professions. 1/3 people responded that concern about the income, personal finance, and jobs. And we saw that we had a session also on this particular topic where we talked about how to cope this problem of getting laid off from the company or change the skill set which we require that. So this is the poll response here. Now we'll come back to our panelists. We'll start with Dr. Balaji Jaganamohan. So Dr. Balaji, how was the last few months for you as a professionals, and what the change you saw in healthcare professionals in particular?
Yeah, so first of all, I would agree with the audience poll that self and family is important because, like, the Prime Minister has said, "Jaan hai to jahan hai." If you don't have life, then you don't have anything. So business, everything will follow after that. Yeah, so I think when this news about COVID broke loose, especially across the world, starting from China and then how rapidly it spread to several countries. I think we have been on the caution, on the lookout for the disease arriving in India as well. And as the cases started to arrive in India, from cases to clusters to now we are in community spread, I think when it all started, there was a period of confusion, a period of uncertainty, because we were not sure whether we will also be taking the same path what other countries have taken of imposing a lockdown. Now, my practice primarily deals with non-communicable diseases, so chronic ailments, where the patients have to follow up long term. So we did have a lot of phone calls coming in during the early part of March on whether the clinic will be shut. Are they at a risk of getting an infection as the infection started to spread in the community? Because I think whatever was being broadcasted in news channels of cases arriving from China, a few medical students having carried the cases, or other people coming from foreign countries, was preliminary reports, and people still needed a lot of information. And then suddenly, I think, as GST and demonetization broke loose, I think Prime Minister has this way of suddenly imposing things. So we had a lockdown, and we were sort of prepared for it because from 26th itself, we started with teleconsultations. So we did ensure that all our patients were informed that this medium of consultation is available for them, and we will be in touch with them through whatever necessary investigations also which could be done for them. Even if we have a glucometer which can check their values, that would suffice at this point. And then entire April, there's been a lot of teleconsults for patients. And since we were permitted to go to the clinics as well, so once a week we were visiting. So yeah, so if I have to actually summarize the initial period of lockdown, I would say that there was a lot of confusion, uncertainty. There was no clear path as to what would be the way forward. And I think for all of us, it has been a learning process this entire 2 to 3 months, because there has been a lot of regulatory, statutory changes that have kept happening, from time to time. especially with regards to movement of people within the state and interstate as well, and also people coming in from countries. So I've had patients who come from other countries who were put on quarantine, and they've had challenges in receiving the medications during that period. So several issues that we have faced. But broadly, I would say a lot of confusion, uncertainty, and no clarity.
Now let me go to Saurabh. Actually, this whole thing put a lot of a change, forced change. Obviously, it was not anticipated in medical rep, in the land managers, in the pharmaceutical company. So, how the things are now sort of in your industry?
I think there is a lot of fundamental change that I am seeing in last 3 months. You know, of course, COVID has impacted practically everyone, and pharma professionals therefore are no exception to this. More importantly, our industry was largely um, face-to-face interaction dependent. So there are a lot of physical interaction, or one-on-one interaction, which used to happen between the company and the healthcare professionals, and also in between the teams, like the marketing teams and the sales team, the supply chain, and so on. With COVID-19 suddenly hitting, and I would say the industry evolution was not as much as many other industries have been. Like, unlike financial institutions, which are, say, digitalized some 2 decades back or 1.5 decade back, pharmaceutical industry was not as much geared up with technology and so on. Though we have been using some technology interface, but still it's very limited. So it really hit us very hard. So in the initial few weeks, we had to really upskill our guys to pick up the usage of technology, because the movements was restricted. People were not allowed to move out, and this was the first time wherein people started connecting with doctors, over certain digital platforms. It started with telecalls. It started with couple of video calls. People started using various digital platforms for educational program, interacting with healthcare professionals. And then we saw towards the end of 3 or 4 weeks, people are slightly more comfortable using the tech platforms and so on. Second, another thing was, since the patient footfall drastically reduced in hospitals and clinics, with the concern of safety, which we just saw in the poll as well, it was important how do we train our guys, because our industry was still coming in essential commodity. Some of our people were allowed to move out, especially all our plants were working, all our research facilities were working day in and day out. In fact, government has mandated the industry that there shouldn't be any shortage of medicines or essential drugs which are required for patients at large. And therefore we had to really train people as well, like how do we move out, what to do, what not to do, and so on. And the typical medical rep had to face challenges, because many of them are bachelors, they stay alone, they're single, families are away, so they have to manage on their own. Second, manage the work, because work from home was new to them. And third, then they had to manage customers which are meeting doctors, and at certain occasions even channel, because the entire healthcare channel is also logistic dependent. So you have movements of goods not happening, trucks restricted movement within the city. Also wholesalers were not very much open. So I saw even many occasions guys had to go and do the work of getting the drugs available at the chemist shop by themselves. And then in certain critical situation, like in our oncology, cancer, etc., those critical situations, people even made arrangements to get the drug delivered at home, so that the needy patients or the patient who is in acute requirement is able to manage that situation. So all of these are some of the tenets which impacted the, I would say, sales operations. For marketing operations and people who are operating in strategy or planning sales based out of head offices, for them I would say the work was almost 24/7, because ever evolving situation is coming up. Every time we solve for one thing, second is coming up, and hence they had to really keep up the pace. The entire decisions on resource allocation were to be reframed, looking at the current situation. And then they were also required to give those solutions which are friendly to patients and to our customer doctors and so on, so that we are able to service the patients which are dependent on pharmaceutical industry for drugs and so on. So I think those are some changes which we have seen happening, and work boundaries are no more there. So typically the office would start at 9 and end at 6. When you're working from home, people are 24/7 available. So I think that's one shift which I see for sure.
Huge shift. Yeah, yeah. So, Professor Sunil, what sort of said that pharma is also essential services. Uh, Last week, exactly 1 week back, last Sunday actually, one of my friend who was a working medical representative in a company expired, died of COVID. Uh, I think this fear, what came in this uh, uh, poll also, is real, and we have heard so many nurses, many doctors died of COVID while doing their job. In Hyderabad, one doctor went to see his patient, he got infection there and expired. This is the scenario at the level of the people. You have been executive coach for senior leaders of industry. Leaders are supposed to or lead the team and the company for unforeseen situation. I think this situation which we are facing right now, we never anticipated. It was so sudden. Which kind of leadership behavior, style, and whatever you say should actually help leaders to lead the team at this critical kind of situation.
Okay. Yeah. Now let me quickly walk you through this 150 days that we have gone through, and typically what would run in the minds of people on 150 days thing. See, the immediate reaction. So when it was happening in China, it's happening there. It's got nothing to do with us. And then Europe is suffering, and Italy is going down. Yeah, that's their problem, not ours. But suddenly, in January, it's right at our doorstep. And then there was this entire thing that in February, we kind of staggered through it, and suddenly there was a lockdown, and so it hit us suddenly. So the first concern is like exactly what was said in the poll, that my safety, the safety of my family, was an immediate concern for that. And so everybody took this relevant kind of precautions, and the kind of cases that you were finding were not in the strata of people who are in the professional field. So it's still not our problem. The medical professionals out there, I will talk about the healthcare professionals down thing. And then we came to think, once we got used to knowing what kind of a format, what kind of a lifestyle we might need to do to protect ourselves and our families sufficiently, then our concern was in terms of the next thing that came up. What happens to my income? I'm no longer working in the way I'm working. What is the kind of thing that the company is going to do? Some companies are shutting up, then there is layoffs, and there's a whole lot of, then the economic concerns came in. And now that that has also come to a thing that we've either got used to it or figured out a way to survive in that, then the concern is what's happening on the outside. If I look outside in my city, the numbers are astronomical compared to what it was a month ago. So which means that there is something phenomenally bad that's happening out there. So how do I protect myself? Now, this is also going to pass once we come to terms with that. And then comes the real thing. What am I going to do about this? Because I'm going to be still there. Enough number of people like me are going to be still there. Most of us will survive. There is still going to be a life after this entire COVID thing going through, whatever time frame it may be, a year from now, a couple of years from now, either through a vaccine route or through a community or a herd immunity route, whatever form, life will still be there. So what am I going to do in that life? That will be the concern that most of us will begin to address. Now, the question that you asked, Pranav, is about the leadership trying to address that part of it. The safety concern, the economic concerns are things that are here and now, and by and large, people will survive that. But what we are least prepared for is life after COVID. What are we going to do? And particularly the healthcare professionals will have to figure out what happens there. And adjunct with the healthcare professionals is our pharmaceutical industry, because we come as a package. Okay, so I'm going to say something that's not really popular in the way it might sound, but the fact is it exists in that form. All through history, we've had armies protecting us, protecting our borders, protecting the police forces, protecting law and order situations in our places. And right now, we have a border skirmish, and there are soldiers dying there. Now, all these soldiers signed on into an army knowing well what is the kind of life that they're going to. So as long as we don't have a war, army is a very comfortable place to work in. Very well taken care of. They're very respected. They are members of a community of a high stature. They have all that. But the moment there is a war, they are the ones that are going to be up in front. They never complain that I will not go to the front to fight. I will not be the one to die for my nation. I will not be the one to die for my community. I will not be the one to, I didn't sign up to die. Now that's the thing that we need to also remember, that all of us in this healthcare sector have signed up for being the front line when there is a health crisis. We've never had this in the past. So nowhere in our memory or the memory of a couple of generations before us have had any form of a personal threat to ourselves in things. So when a war is declared, you are the soldiers. So it comes on us the responsibility to now not complain about what's happening to me, but to look at what have I signed on to protect. Okay, the community has given each of us, whether it is doctors, nurses, or any of the paramedics, or the pharmaceutical professionals, or the pharmaceutical industry, absolute respect in the community all so far.
Yes.
Right now, the community is calling on us to say that, okay, now we are under threat. You are our first line. You need to save us, find some way to save us. So we need to step up. That's my first concern. We can't say that, okay, the doctors have died because of this, they are at risk. That's what they signed up for. The pharmaceutical professionals, whether they are a PSR, a salesman on the street, or the CEO in a company, know what they've signed up for, but they never signed up visualizing this might be a scenario that will come. But when this scenario comes, we cannot say this is not what we signed up for. We are there, we have to deliver. Okay. Now, having said that, one of the things that we'll have to look at is the fact that this is not the end of the world. Now, all of us are savvy about what is going to happen. Most of us will still be around after COVID. Okay. The mortality rate is about, in worst scenarios, it's about 3 to 4%. So which means 95%, or even in some cases 1 to 2%, so which means 99% of us will still be there. Some of us would have gone through the entire trauma of being ill and would have been survivors. The rest of us would have been protected by those of us who have been survivors, but we will all still be there. So the question is, how do we leverage our experiences? How do we make sure that our experiences count for the effort and the suffering that we're going through? Because this is a period in history that will be remembered for several centuries to come. And how they remember us as a generation that lived and survived through the COVID will depend on what we do now. Okay, so that's where the question of leadership comes up. How do leaders inspire people to do things, not be caught up in a very insular, small, inward-looking, me and my family alone, but also be responsive to the community around you. A community can be a small constituency of a set of flats that you're living in, or a colony that you're living in, or maybe the locality that you're in. And a larger sense of leadership, it could be the organization where you're working in, the profession that you're in, whatever. That constituency, each one of us are looked up to because we have enjoyed the pleasures or the privileges of stature. Now, the community is calling on us to give that stature a meaning and lead them in terms of what we need to do. So we are the examples.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to make a point. We are the examples that if we show that we are brave enough to stand up and say, yes, we count and we will do things, then that's the leadership that the others would follow and be the kind of icons that we want. The most visible community in this crisis is the healthcare community. So they are really looking to us to show that, okay, we are brave enough. It doesn't matter what is happening to us. We will be out there to provide. We will provide every Medicare facility, every drug and essential that is required. We will be there with you all the time. If you're able to make that statement, that's the leadership that's being called for. And it's not difficult, because if you look at industry, there have been industries that have been in crisis. And in those crises, there have been leaders that have been able to turn around the company.
Right.
If you look at the medical and healthcare professionals, they have crisis is an everyday event for them, and they're able to step up and do it then. Now there's an alarm bell ringing, so they need to also do that kind of thing. So the leadership is not a reactive one saying that, okay, we are afraid for ourselves and thing, but in terms of looking at what is the life going to be after that. Okay, so maybe somewhere down the line we look at what happens after COVID and how do you prepare for that. But if you're asking for the leadership, then this is my perspective that I'd like you to keep in mind. All of us are people that others are looking up to. We cannot show fear. What we need to show is that we are there to stand the first line. Okay, that's the thing.
So what could get, actually, I was feeling very good about when you talked about this calling, right? The self-worth goes up, this calling. We got the privilege. Now still enjoying the privilege that whole world is looking at healthcare professionals and pharma. They're waiting some miracle will be given by the pharma and healthcare professionals to happen, right? And that gives a sense of purpose, a larger purpose to work with more enthusiasm and to drive the team maybe more effectively. I don't know what Sourabh and Dr. Balaji thinks about that point. I want to just your comment on what Professor Sunil has told about the leadership behavior at this moment.
Pranav, I would concur with what Sunil said on the point that, it typically brings to the point that this is the time to really be at the forefront and not just sort of trying to avoid the situation or try to portray self as being somewhere in a corner, because appropriate focus is there right now. In fact, the entire world is looking at healthcare professionals, and right from vaccine development to making sure that things are available, I think is there. So I very much concur. I would also add upon one point on what Sunil just mentioned, that the only another thing that we need to do is we need to train the guys, all the entire structure and people for this mindset, because typically people have not had this much of focus and opportunity what they're getting right now from the industry point of view. And therefore, if people still continue to look inward and not embracing this, I would say, this challenge and also an opportunity, then it would not translate into the organization. Because finally, this thought process has to move from idea to execution, right from the top to bottom. And that's when, like how in army happens, that when the command and control till the last soldier in the army, if they're aligned to objective and then they work like a force, is what should happen for industry as well. So it has to move from leadership to every level, and people will have to really demonstrate day in and day out by real life examples and things going out by themselves and doing it. So thank you, Professor, for bringing this point, and I very much appreciate the current focus which is there on pharma and healthcare.
Okay.
Dr. Balaji, does it resonates with the healthcare professors also, what Professor said?
Yeah, definitely. I think Professor Sunny has made a very valid point that we have to lead from the front. The onus is on us. Now, since we are the frontliners, if we set the example in the right way, because we know that, unlike an army trying to fight an enemy, here the enemy is an invisible one. He's invisible, he's on the loose, and he's creating havoc. And the other thing is, normally, when you go for warfare, you try to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the enemy. Now, here in this case, the enemy, we haven't understood the enemy very well. Every time there has been speculations about the presentation of the patient, we did understand that the symptoms initially could be respiratory in nature. Then we did find out that there are non-respiratory symptoms. For example, the virus could be shed even in the feces of the patient. Then it was understood that this virus could also be found to induce blood clots, especially in the brain. So a lot of things are very evolving about this virus, and different strains that have been identified. So some strains are more virulent in nature, some strains are less virulent. And there have been shouts about immunity that we get about this virus, which could be short term. We are not looking at immunity that is conferred from chickenpox or measles, which is long term. So it might as well remain like a Spanish flu. We know Spanish flu came in 1918, and it still exists as an H1N1, which still has sporadic seasonal outbreaks. So for all said and done, we couldn't have this virus, having outbreaks every now and then, during the winter season in certain countries, even in our parts of the country. So I think that probably COVID is going to be there forever unless we find an effective vaccine. And vaccine as well is something that we cannot be sure about the efficacy of the vaccine because it's been a rat race. Many companies are trying to actually bypass the drug development process, which generally takes around 10 to 15 years. But that is
Right.
for the welfare of society, right? Because there's an urgent need
Yeah.
for the right medication. And we also know that there has been a lot of repurposing of drugs. So they're not medications that have been discovered for COVID per se. They were for other flus, malaria, anti-inflammatory drugs, and they're being repurposed. And every now and then there is a hue and cry about medications. It all started with hydroxychloroquine, then it went, to other antiviral agents, a lot of antiretroviral agents like lopinavir, ritonavir. There was, a lot of noise. Now there is remdesivir and favipiravir. Now they're talking a lot about steroids, dexamethasone. So still there is not much of a unanimous consensus, if I may say, as far as treatment is concerned. So and I'm sure the same thing will happen when vaccines will come, because there are many companies who are making vaccines. Each and every one will claim a much better efficacy and a much long-term immunity. So I think it's a work in progress. A lot of things to be learned. But yeah, we as the foot soldiers have to keep our guards on. And I think I will talk to you, when you ask me other questions about what measures we've taken in the clinic. But we
Right.
try to sort of, educate patients at different levels. It's something that they need to take up amongst themselves, that it's the duty of every person to follow some of these precautionary measures to prevent further spread in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think Professor Sunil, you have given a lot of clarity to us. Actually, this is not I'm saying only. I have here the chat message of Sankar Das, who is the CEO of Curatio Healthcare. He writes that there is a great clarity, Sunil, what we have signed for while entering healthcare. That's I think very, very, what do you call, reaffirming the commitment what we need to do at this moment while entire world is looking up to us. We have to deliver that. It is not the time for any personal selfishness, rather that the larger purpose. I think so many people has commented that Prachi Parihar Saxena comments that very nicely articulated, Sunil. It gave us a new thought, dimension, profound thought. Thanks for sharing. Then Satya writes, so, yeah, there are questions, so I will take later on that. Good. So now let me, this is the a different scenario, and we need to learn to handle differently. So let me go to the participants once again. Let me ask a questions with this poll. At your individual level, have you noticed any shift in what you value in life? This is some questions, something which is a very deep personal questions. Before going further, we want to understand that you need to respond that questions with the poll, and I see people are responding that. Good. So those people who are responding using chat box, I suggest to use the tool here, which is below your picture, below the video which you are watching. Below that, you can see there is a options to respond that. Use that. Meantime, I see there are a lot of response here. Saru Panda, yeah, thanks, Professor Sunil, for that insight. Shiv Shankar Maurya, excellent, Professor Sunil, great thoughts, Professor Sunil. Yeah, some of the out of the box thinking is required. Yes, it is right. Okay, so now see the poll result, how the things had happened. I'm ending the poll, and the result is that 82% people responded yes at their individual level. You have noticed any shift in what you value in the life. I think this is a very personal question for me. I relooked in myself what you value in my life, and actually altered certain things to fit that the deeper what I I really want. And there are 14% people responded no shift, but become more mindful of. This is mindfulness is something I personally felt this COVID-19 taught to me, being mindful of whatever you do, being mindful of everything actually. It is not a right rest actually. So this is the response. Thank you very much for the response. Let me come to questions now. We'll start back to Dr. Balaji, because as Saurabh was talking about earlier, the change in the way pharmaceutical companies working. Same way, there is a change in the way you guys are also working, looking at the patient, serving the patient. Chronic disease patient can't wait. They have to be managed. Their parameter have to be managed. So how you are adopting this technology, and what are the learning experience adopting those technologies? So I would like to know the insight rather, not the process. The process is now people know that, and how you have handled those concern of the patient or concern of your paramedics, your supporting staffs.
Yeah, so when you talk about digital platforms, so I think that was the only resort that we were left in, during the lockdown period to reach out to patients and consult them. I think it has been a new platform for each and every healthcare professional. Any doctor across the world, I don't think has been equipped how to consult through telemedicine. Thanks to the MCI guidelines, which came up in early April, which has legalized telemedicine. So that made things easy for us. But yeah, definitely, I mean, since you said process is something that is aware, since I work with Apollo, one thing what I found was a little different compared to a lot of other telemedicine platforms is Apollo having a larger chain, of pharmacies, of diagnostics. So we could, for example, I could consult a patient sitting in Bihar, Jharkhand, Bengal, with the blood test done at the doorstep there, and also the medication delivery from the pharmacy. So it's like an end-to-end solution. So you get the diagnostic, you get the consultation, and you have all the medications delivered. The patient doesn't have to walk out at all. Whereas a lot of telemedicine, platforms, what I've heard from my other peers and colleagues is that they only provide consultation solutions, maybe to some extent diagnostics or pharmacy, but it's not an end-to-end. But definitely, I think this platform has been difficult for us as a healthcare professional because there are certain challenges that are involved. For example, let's say there is a patient with chronic kidney disease or heart failure. If we have to auscultate the patient, if we have to see for pedal edema, inspect them, then that's a challenge. We cannot really, visually be able to come to a conclusion. Secondly, if the person has a diabetic foot ulcer, that again, visually, we do not know whether it's an infected ulcer, what is the depth of the ulcer, whether there's a vascularity issue. So there have been challenges in terms of consulting patients. And also the other bit is the technology itself. For example, not every patient now, for example, when I've consulted patients based in rural areas, they don't have good access, high-speed internets. So there has been delays, not being able to understand what they're trying to say, a lot of buffering that has happened. So there have been a lot of challenges, but we did continue with telemedicine because we didn't have any other options. Patients were very anxious, especially diabetics and other patients with comorbidities who form a higher chunk of patients having fatality with COVID. In fact, these are the ones where the fatality rate can be as high as 17 to 18%. So telemedicine was reassuring for them. For a lot of patients, we also had telephonic consultations because not everybody could have access to Wi-Fi video consultations. But I think now we've come to terms with it. I think most of our doctors have adapted to how these platforms should be used. In fact, even now, although I started physically seeing patients from the 3rd of May, almost on a regular basis, but telemedicine is another option that we've kept, and many patients are taking it up. They're very comfortable. They see that it's easy for non-communicable diseases where we don't require a lot of examination. It's based on a lot of blood and urine investigations.
Right. We come to Professor Sunil now, but before that, a quick poll, because this question I'm going to ask Professor Sunil is based on this poll itself. The poll is at a personal level. So now we have entered from the organization to personal level. In your professional front, what among the below mentioned are you considering or pursuing most actively right now? You can respond the poll here. Meantime, by the time people are responding, I would like to ask Professor Sunil that this changes in the function, the way people perform their duty, the business, right, is shifting a lot, which what you observe Dr. Balaji saying, and what you saw people are doing, or Sourabh also said that the shift in the working, right? So to an individual professional, my question would be now to you, that which I want you to respond after the poll, is that what are your recommendation to take this challenge of learning something I never did in my last 20 years, 30 years, like that, totally new thing, right? So that creates some sort of fear on that. Before you respond, I would like to show the response of the participants, what they feel about this change thing. So let us end the poll now and see the response. Okay, so 66%, 2/3 of the people responded that they identified new skill to learn and pursuing now also. 1/4 of the people said that upskilling with the competent level to mastery level. So may not be new skill, but they want to build up a more mastery on that skill. This can very, very prominent level. 8% also says that reaffirming and consolidating the skill what they have already had, right? So you see, Professor, there is a need for the change in the skill set, or rising from the one level to higher level of skill which they already have. What is your recommendation in this scenario for us?
See, Pranav and folks, I would ask you to step beyond what we're looking at, an existing skill and new skill and thing. I'm going to ask you to change the entire model that you're actually living your life with, because it's never going to be the same again. And there is no point trying to retrofit an existing model to a new condition. You're only going to get a suboptimal performance from what you're going to get out of it. Each one of us is very capable of being malleable. You can, if you can get a great grandfather or a grandfather to use Skype and use a video call just because the grandson is on the other side of the world, that means that it is possible for us to relook at our life. A grandfather would probably have encountered a video call 70 years after life, but still the man or lady has been able to adapt to it, which means that it's possible for us. Now, it's just that that generation had about 10, 15 years by which they could slowly evolve the change. But for us today, the rethink of our model of life is now and immediate. In 6 months from now, the world that you will step out to is going to be radically different from what it was this time last year or 6 months ago. If you are going to carry your old self with perhaps a version change, you're going to be that much at a disadvantage from the people who are coming in with an entirely new outlook to life. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to radically change your model itself rather than looking at upskilling. Now, if you're good at it, if you're able to look at it, then it's fine. It works very well. Like, for instance, first thing is that we are a generation of people that is used very comfortably to interpersonal interactions, the touch and feel kind of generation. Particularly, let's say, look at the model of our the way we run our marketing setup. We are doing entirely out of visiting the doctors, talking to them, showing them a chart presentation, a PPT, and any of those kind of things. But today, you're never going to be able to touch or be in the same room as a doctor as frequently and as easily as you do. So your entire sales outlook, your point of sales outlook has to change altogether.
Right.
You're already seeing an evolutionary change in a marketplace, in a supermarket that you walk into. No supermarket is the same today as it was 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
6 weeks from now, the supermarket that is able to change its model to get a thing delivered to the customer directly would be far more successful.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going through model change. How about we? We are just trying to fit ourselves into learning a new skill, a new language, a new program is going to be inadequate, is what I'm asking you to consider. You need to relook at what life is all about. Dr. Balaji talked about suddenly being pitched into doing telemedicine. Mm. What about a medical doctor who used to diagnose with only a stethoscope? There was an entire generation that lived with a diagnosis on a stethoscope. What happens to his life or her life? Suddenly, a stethoscope is non-existent.
Yes.
There is a technology and a medium interface between you and your patient, you and your customer. So the one who is most easily and quickly adapt to living and working in that medium, which connects you with your work, connects you with your world, connects you with your community, connects you with your patient, that is the kind of person who's going to be successful in the future. So look at each one of us and say, how am I going to connect with people that I would need to do business with, I would need to live with, I would need to work with? What's the kind of interaction that I will need to then you need to look at changing your life to incorporate that medium into your life. We have a children's generation that is born with a cell phone. Okay, now if you show, I mean, the joke is that when they don't know how to turn a page in a book, they swipe the page hoping the page will move. Or they will kind of pinch the photograph open hoping that they will get a zoom in. That's because that's their experience, because they have lived with that medium. But that's the medium that is going to be current. Books will probably, some of them can live without even seeing a book, because every known knowledge to mankind is available in the palm of your hand today.
True.
So if you're able to adapt to that, if you can reconfigure your life, is what I'm proposing. Not just reskill, I'm asking you to reconfigure your life to the reality that will come 6 weeks from now, 8 weeks from now, a year from now. You're going to be radically living in a different world. So the quicker you are in reconfiguring your thinking, then you'll be much more adapted to that life. If you're going to reskill or change existing skills or shift the mindset slightly, you may be optimizing yourself, but you will still find yourself that much inadequate in a new world. So that's the challenge that I'm asking you to look at. Now, the path to this has got some things that you need to consider. The first thing is change. This radical enforced change is going to be the one that hits you between the eyes. And what's going to hit you is also, along with this, you have a lot of other things going with it, because there's a lifestyle change, there is a living change, there's a relationship change, there is a safety fear. So I'm going to ask you to keep in mind three things very closely in terms of what actually is. So one is, what is the state of your emotional health? What's the state of your mental health? And then the state of your financial health. These are the things that will make you prepared for what is to come. It's not everything else. Now, in all these things, the critical thing is being self-aware. How much you explore yourself, how much you explore your emotional self, how much you explore your emotional capabilities, emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, that will make you prepared much more to be adaptive. Okay, keeping yourself in a level state of mind, your mental health issues, and whether you are able to stay calm and not get into extremes of emotions, extremes of either positive or negative emotions, and being able to handle interpersonal situations, and most importantly, be able to build and carry forward good relationships. That will determine your success in terms of the skills that you look at. Skills are only a vehicle, but if you don't know driving, your vehicle is useless to you. Okay, it also requires you to look at what is going to be the state of my financial health. And this is that if my current job is not going to be meeting my ends, and think, what else can I do? Do I have a malleability in my work potential, or am I only stuck in being only a salesperson, or only being a person in a manufacturing setup, or only being a medical doctor? Or is that the only thing that I can do? Or can I also? You will need to look at augmenting your sources of remuneration and income to make yourself survive. The next generation that comes will probably grow into that kind of world. So they have a head start over you. So that's not really something to bother about yourself. But you're the transition generation. And it's for you to make that entire relook at your model, reconfigure. And I mean, if necessary, hit a Control-Alt-Del in your old life and reboot your life for the current world. That is what I'm suggesting that you look at. Okay, if you can do it yourself, great. But if you are finding yourself difficult doing this, seek help. because there are professionals who can handhold you through this process and get you to the other side successfully. So don't worry about things. Make sure that you get across, because I can assure you that most of us will definitely be there on the other side. But how successful you are on the other side depends on what we do on this side. Okay, that's what I'd like you to think about.
So reconfigure yourself. Be more aware about yourself, aware about your emotional, financial, personal, right, level, and maybe a span, increase your span of your capacity to learn new things, to do that. So Saurabh, as a leader of a big team, how do you see these words can be used as a personal leadership and driving the team?
See, I think the way I look at it, Pranav, is it's like self 2.0. I mean, the way I could defer of what Sunil was just mentioning. So it's a second version of ourselves. And typically for professionals like us and the entire industry, you'll have to look at a new ecosystem, because the way I envisage is the new ecosystem which is evolving. And I think Dr. Balaji just touched upon it, which is a connected ecosystem where there will be amount of self-care, there will be more of IoT, the Internet of Things, the technology which is getting connected, and a whole lot of work probably will be done by machines. I mean, I am not too sure 10-year hence we'll have sufficient data to do a regular diagnostic only with machine and certain algorithms which will throw us the outcomes. But what will never happen, probably, at least so far, what we have not seen is a whole question about the emotional intelligence, how to manage that, how to manage self. Because in my mind, that would be really profound. Because leaders typically in this situation need to think about that. The regular engineering and algorithm logical based stuff we should outsource to supercomputers. That will happen eventually. But the behavioral, the emotional, and the the mindfulness kind of sort of work is what we need to keep for ourselves, and that will help us re-engineer the new world, and that will help us reimagining the entire ecosystem. And typically for myself and even for the industry, the way I look at it is we need to reimagine that ecosystem. Then we need to look about these skills and all, because a couple of these skills are not very difficult to acquire. In no time, in 2 weeks time, we see the entire ecosystem of healthcare professionals as well as medical community could adopt to technology. The face-to-face meeting got converted to WhatsApp or video calls. Some amount of telemedicine could happen. We could see a lot of diagnostic at home happening. So these are not difficult things to pick up, because our brain is wired to pick up certain things which is at time of need. So tech, while we are all talking so much that technology will take, but those are easy skills to acquire. What people are finding difficult, I mean, even if you talk to professionals, is how do I manage self? What are the relevance I am drawing out of this whole new thing which has happened? Because 2.5, 3 months when people were at home, many of them didn't even know what to do with family, with themselves, and now they are sort of reorienting. The whole question that you asked clearly reflect 2/3 of the people are really looking at finding a new purpose for themselves. So I think there is amount of reimagining which is required,
Right.
amount of repurposing which is required, and more importantly, managing self. I think if that happens well, the rest of the elementary, I would say still elementary skills, because technology, interface of patient doctors, industry with doctors will become, I mean, what we are doing right now, whether it's telemedicine or interacting with healthcare professionals through digital platform, is in practice in some other part of the geographies already. So it's just that we have copy pasted and adopted in our ecosystem in India. It's not fundamental innovation, but we'll have to wire ourselves for everyday innovation, every day reimagining the world and trying to figure out something new which is relevant. And that, at least in my mind, is how I'm looking at the way forward of the time ahead.
Right. I think we just started, looks like just a few minutes back, and now it is time 5 o'clock. So we'll wind up now. Before that, we'll do a concluding message from all three of you one by one. So I would start with Dr. Balaji, then Sourabh, and finally conclude with Professor Sunil. So Dr. Balaji, what's your final message looking at the current and the future scenario for healthcare professionals and professionals working in pharmaceutical and life science companies?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we have to sum up from all the information that even the other panelists have, commented, have suggested, I think the first thing is that we need to value our lives. Lives are very important. And we need to bring about very rapid changes, like probably Mr. Saurabh had mentioned, self 2.0. That's a very good way of looking at it. You need to reboot and try to sort of reconfigure yourself and adapt to changes very fast. And technology is something I think will be an interface for many months and many years to come as we look into this future that is very uncertain. So I think for healthcare professionals, whether it is doctors, it is the industry, it is diagnostics and other allied sciences that are involved in healthcare, everybody have to change in such a way that they imbibe technology in their day-to-day functioning. And I think all of us have to stay connected through technology. And as far as COVID is concerned, I think that the precautionary measures that have been suggested, wherein we need to maintain physical distancing, use of a mask, sanitizing at regular intervals. So if we carry out these measures, we can still prevent, major second or third waves in the future, because there have been countries which are prone to second wave, for example, in China. So the threat still lurks around us. So we have to find innovative ways to work, innovative ways to behave. So these behavioral changes are very important, so that if we have to secure a future for us, for our families to live happily, healthily, disease free, these are some things we need to imbibe.
Thanks. Saurabh, please.
So I would say, as a concluding point, Pranav, that for all of us, though this appears to be a challenging time, but it's a lot of rediscovery, which at least I feel professionals can do. It is giving us unique opportunity to reshape the way industry is operating currently. I mean, I'm talking pharmaceutical industry, the way it is operating, right from adoption of technology to changing self and the way people are working. I think it does give this opportunity to reinvent. And as leaders, we must not miss on this thinking behavior, because if we can make a dramatic shift now. And in adversity, we have got this opportunity to reshape the industry and the way things are happening. And we can do a lot of good for community as well as for self if we invest time in rethinking, reimagining. So discover the 2.0 version of self is what I would say. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Sunil, I would like to have a more elaborate, more clarity and the directions for healthcare professionals and pharmaceutical professionals from you.
Okay. Let me just kind of walk through what we have gone through. The first thing is that please revisit what you have signed up for. You have signed up to be in the front line, and now it's your call. You're being called upon to actually defend the line. So you need to step up. And each one of us, right from the innovators in a lab to the frontline healthcare workers, every one of us have got this opportunity to really look at what we have signed up for and work towards it. That's the first thing. The second thing is your old self is not going to be of much use to you now, because the environment and the situation and what the future has changed. It's no longer the old model where you can just sort of create an evolutionary change and eventually adapt to something. No, you will need to look at putting it the way Sourabh might say it, it's not a U 1.2 or 1.3 that's going to make a difference. You have to be 2.0, or maybe at some point of time, even 3.0. You need to step up to do that. You need to have a radical change about yourself. And you need to relook at what is life going to be on the other side, and what am I going to be doing there? And how am I going to, what kind of me will survive this, and how will I work with there? So the situation there is going to be highly technology intensive, very little of the touch and feel and the kind of thing that you need to manage yourself much more than kind of taking yourself for granted. Now your your support systems are going to be your emotional support systems for yourself, for the members of your family, and also for the members of your community. You have a responsibility, and that you must step up for. So which requires you to do, one is to make sure that you are in touch with your emotional self today. Figure out what and how your emotions are moving, how your emotions are configured, what's actually working and what's not working. And again, if you're not able to do it yourself, seek help. There's plenty of help outside that can help you work with. The more you're in touch with your emotional self, the more you will have a stability about the way your psychological and emotional mental health is. And that is what will help you change. If you don't follow this process, your change is not going to happen. You're going to trip over it, or you're probably going to get just a model change of yourself, a reworking of yourself. That retrofitting will not help. So you need to start at the beginning by exploring yourself more, being in touch with your emotions, and being in touch with exploring relationships with people. Okay, and like what Sourabh began saying, that life began at 9 o'clock in the office and ended at 6 o'clock, and a different life was there at home from 6 o'clock to maybe next day morning. And home was very often used as a personalized hotel that you used to go to sleep in. That's no longer there. You're living there now. Your entire 24 hours is spent in there, so which means your relationships become more important. Explore that and make sure that you're fairly well connected there. Then look at building yourself, having other options rather than only a single profession and a single source of income. You will need to work at other things that can actually supplement what you are doing. Even if you're well off in the way you are, you can create those supplements because it can definitely help other members. So which gives us the additional responsibility of taking care of people other than yourself. You have an extended responsibility to your community, extended responsibility to your co-workers, extended responsibility to your relationships. So you can look at that. So you need to look at what more can I do? Stretch the capabilities that you have. Skills will help you in expressing yourself, but unless you're working on the basics, the skills will not be of much use. Okay. The next thing to look at is what will be the state of industry after COVID. Now, after the entire COVID epidemic kind of eases out, and I would buy what Dr. Balaji said, it's never going to really go away. It's going to exist in pockets and revisit us often. So when it's no longer the intensive things, the healthcare industry will, at least for the next 1 or 2 generations, have a higher emphasis. And therefore, people would look up to this industry for leadership on how life could be led. And you have a really new way and a new stature that you will find in the social system. So you will have to step up to being able to lead that stature that you're going to acquire. So that will give you greater opportunity, greater connectivity, greater ways of actually molding how a society progresses. These are things that will happen to professionals in the healthcare sector. Okay. In the previous generations, anything from manufacturing to services had a run of life. But that's not going to be the central of life going forward, at least in a foreseeable time. Later on, things may change. But we, in the healthcare sector, are going to be up in the forefront, and you are going to be most visible. And being most visible gives us opportunities for leadership and molding how a community and a future should be. That's where we can step up to. So most important right now is to get in touch with yourself, understand yourself, work with yourself, so you have the stability and you have the opportunity to make change happen. Okay. And then look at how you can secure yourself and secure people around you so that you're prepared for a future going ahead. And it's got to be a 2.0 or a 3.0. You cannot have a 1.2 or a 1.2. It's a version change. It's going to be inadequate. That's my suggestion to you.
Very inspiring and actually giving a real direction, at the same time a responsibility for healthcare professionals and pharmaceutical professionals. I'm sorry I could not read many of the chat message comments here. I have so many things. I wanted more perspective from this eminent panelist here. Thank you very much for all the participants whose questions you have responded here. You have put your comments. We could not take that. I'm sorry about that because of the paucity of the time. I would like to thank on behalf of my all the participants, all 3 panelists, Dr. Balaji, Jaganamohan, Mr. Sourabh, Agrawal, and Professor Sunil Guptan. Thank you very much. You have inspired us. You have given the sense of direction. You have really clarified many of the doubt to us. Thank you very much. With this, we close this session today. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very nice being with all of you. Thank you. Take care and stay safe.